Interesting. So in light of Alan Bowman getting a 7th year, Taulia Tagovailoa has entered the transfer portal. He would be a grad transfer. But here's the thing about Taulia Tagovailoa. He technically, right now at this moment, has no eligibility left. He has played and used all of his 5 years. But his contention is going to be that in 2019, when he played in 5 games for Alabama, 2 of which he didn't throw a pass and he only threw 12 passes, that should not count. Had he only played 4 games in that year, he would not have played his 5 years yet, which to me would be very interesting in opening up the floodgates of what even is an eligibility clock anymore.
Yeah, I think we've long passed the point of no return when it comes to the eligibility conversation. It's one that needs to be had. It's one that needs to be clarified a little bit, and it's one where I feel like he's probably going to get a waiver because when are we seeing people say no, honestly? I mean, I know there's a few cases here and there. The Raekwon Battle, West Virginia story was a hot one there for a second, but what happened? He eventually got cleared, and I know there's a little instance here and there of where that's not been the case, and you see the fans of various teams pop up in the mentions of a story like this and say, well, what about Sarah who didn't get, and things like that. So I know there's examples of where that's not been, a situation that you're absolutely getting your extra year. But yeah, in this case, I mean, just with where we are and the way things have kind of gone, I think it's a safe bet to assume that you'll find a way to win that, appeal, or that challenge. But to see him, decide to give it another go, I think is obviously very notable. Big time thrower, big time player, and did some really good things with Maryland. And so, yeah, I guess would you consider this a bit of a gamble? I mean, I guess the alternative is you don't get it and you go try your stock in the pros. But, I mean, why not try it if you feel like you want to play another year of college football and you're seeing an Alan Bowman get year number 7 and you're seeing Gary Bohannon get year number 7 and you're seeing other guys get year number 7. So, and if he were to get that, I think that's obviously a big name that's out there. So, we'll see, I guess, what comes of that. But very interesting to see, where we are just with trying to figure everything out. It seems like it's just so complicated, but not really complicated because it's not like, I don't know, man. It's just a weird spot that we're in where I don't know what matters and what rules matter and what actually ever is just a hard and fast rule. Not that everything has to be hard and fast. I think there's some things obviously that you, with more details, can determine different things about. But it's a weird landscape right now, which we've touched on a million times. And so why not challenge it? See if you can get another year of eligibility and be another guy who's been around for a while that'll be back to add even another veteran quarterback to the college football landscape next season.
Yeah, my thinking will be. My thinking is that when the new model comes out, whatever that is, the new, as talks continue on what that will be in the new landscape of college football and college athletics, I think the eligibility clock will get raised but have a kind of a hard limit on it. Because ultimately, look, if you're 26, 27 years old and you're not a professional athlete yet, maybe you need to just move on. But I do think it'll get raised to a certain level and then stop because you do still have to keep the rosters churning, right? You got to still keep the young guys coming in that you want.
Yeah, I mean, we're in the middle of the COVID logjam right now as far as that goes,
So, but there'll be some sort of agreement made because, again, you're going to have to collectively bargain all this stuff out. So some kind of agreement will be made and then you can move on with it of okay, well, now everybody has 6 years and you could petition for a 7th, with injury circumstances or things like that.
And he's going for his 6th, not his 7th, like we've seen some others that we mentioned that were granted there. So odds.
Well, I mean, there was a player recently, I can't remember which school he wound up at. I think it was Oregon State or something, but he was in his 8th year of eligibility because of all the injuries.
Dude,
he was a tight end, and that's just I
love college football and some of the wonkiness, but some of it, I just have to put my foot down. Come on. 8th year of eligibility. I mean, come on. What are we doing here?
Maybe it's time to move on with your life.
I think so.
Yeah. Take the next step. I know it's hard. Look, there is nothing I have watched from doing the job that we do and knowing a lot of the people that we do, then those first couple of years after sports are over for athletes that are elite and, college athletes, because if you're a college athlete, you're an elite athlete. But then you start, like, the filter keeps going of the elite of the elite of the elite. And if you're not in the top 1% of that top 1% and you're, when college is over, your athletics are over, and look, it's hard for professional athletes. It's hard for everybody when that ends.
I just saw a video of, it was the documentary that NFL Network did a couple years ago about Calvin Johnson and how he had to retire because he was just so ravaged by injuries. And it was very abrupt, and nobody other than really he himself knew for the majority of his final season. And then after, playing, I think it was either right before his final game or right after his final game, he finally went and told Jim Caldwell, the head coach at the time, and let him know. And he was sort of shocked, but also I think all the Lions knew like how banged up he really was, and and it really covered that thoroughly in the documentary. But yeah, like he didn't want to go, but sometimes you just have to, and it's
hard, and like it's hard for guys who are having to retire with $50 million in the bank. Like they're even like, what do I do with myself? And the answer when you have that much money is whatever the F you want, man. But it's still hard because you feel like, what's my value to the world if I'm not this guy who I always was? Yeah. It's tough. And so I get that, but there is value to being able to look that square in the face. And it's for everybody. Like when you retire or when part of your life is over, you can't do something anymore. You just have to look it square in the face and go, okay, what's next? I mean, that's a terrifying and wonderful thing of life is what's next.
Yeah. The COVID extra year really logjam things, as we said a few moments ago, and they're still kind of clearing the cars out and trying to get traffic flowing and moving, and with this eligibility clock being the way that it is and waivers and all this and whatnot, it's created a weird situation where I was thinking about this from a Baylor standpoint, because I was trying to think of like article ideas and whatnot, and I was thinking about all of the youth last year, and I know some people hear that and they roll their eyes like, yeah, everybody's got young players and this and that, but then you take into account that a guy like Caden Jenkins is sitting there playing against a 6-year player in Alan Bowman, or this 6-year guy over here, this wide receiver that he's covering. It's like, no, that kind of does matter. And, well, everybody's got freshmen. Yeah, but not everybody's got 4-star freshmen that are going to be gone in 3 years. And so if you are a Baylor, for example, or some of these other teams, like I do think you have to kind of take that into account, the youth these days, because there are teams like Oklahoma State next year, and they've got more guys. Oliver, I think, did Kendall Daniels say earlier, he's coming back for another year, so that's great for Oklahoma State.
Yeah.
But just using this as an example, that's going to be a really old team next year. Like I don't know what the average across the board will be, but as far as like their returning impact guys, they would have to be, in my mind, one of the oldest teams in college football. That will be an advantage for them next year. 2 years ago, when Baylor won the Big 12 title, that was an old football team. There's an advantage to having grown men versus 18, 19-year-olds. So some teams have been able to realize that, taking advantage of that, whether it be just gathering more veteran players or having guys come back for 6th, 7th years. And so, yeah, we're seeing a lot of that, and I guess we'll see if Tagovailoa is able to get a 6th year. That's not that crazy.
No.
But we'll see, I guess, what becomes of that. I know that at one point he was talking to Mike Locksley, I think it was probably mentioned in most of the articles, about his NFL dreams and moving on and all that. But, what's also created this situation is NIL. Like, why move on to a regular job? I'm going to make $50,000 graduating from Oklahoma State at AT&T or whatever my first year, or I could come play Oklahoma State quarterback for a 7th year and make $150,000. And so that right there is, I think, the numero uno reason more than any other of why go get a job for less money when I can play football for another year and never graduate. So that's awfully tempting. That's awfully enticing, especially if you're somebody, to your point of, you don't want to give up the game just yet, and you don't have a pro future that's guaranteed whatsoever. So, yeah, why not play another year, make 6 figures, more than you would make coming out of school probably, and soak it up like Van Wilder one more go-around. I mean, so it's easy to see from a player's perspective why that would be something that you'd want to pursue. And, until, I guess, that bonus year rolls off and we get back to more, I guess, normal, then it's going to be that way, especially with NIL. But hey, good for the players. Like I'm not knocking it, but I do think it's just kind of silly from a college football fan perspective, if I'm being honest, which I always am on this show. for better or worse. I just think it's goofy. I think it's silly to have a 25-year-old, and I know there's plenty of examples. I've seen Brandon Whedon's name mentioned 1,000 times in the last 24 hours, but he went and played baseball.
Hey, yeah, look, I, as a Florida State fan, can't complain because I had Chris Winkie.
Right,
He was the quarterback when I was in school.
But he went and played baseball, and he came back to college.
Yeah.
He didn't just, like, play from 19 to or 18 to 25 or whatever. So yeah, it's strange, but that's the landscape that we're in. So good for Alan Bowman. We'll see with Tagovailoa if he gets that 6th year, and if he does, then that's going to be news. I mean, that's going to be obviously huge news because there's suddenly a pretty good quarterback that's available out there in the market that otherwise is not right now, and we know the appetite that there is for the quarterbacks in this game. So yeah, that's something to definitely keep an eye on. And I don't know when this kind of clears up, but NIL's definitely muddied the waters. That's another area you can look and say that's created some of this without a doubt. And by the way, I went and looked up that player